Welcome to the Living After Faith podcast, here to help you recover from the damage of religion and move forward with your life, putting the emphasis on living after faith. This is the official podcast of recoveringfromreligion.org. Now with today's program on Living After Faith, here's Rich and Deanna Joy Lyons.
I'm Rich Lyons.
I'm Deanna Joy Lyons.
We're American Atheists. Come laugh with us.
That's one of the drops we recorded at the American Atheist Convention. And you'll be hearing some more drops from us and things just to spice things up a little bit. If you would like to laugh with us, call us on the laugh line. And you can find that on our website. I think it's 2-something.
It's 252-32-LIONS.
Yeah. And call us up and just give us your name. You can make a name up. We don't really care. We're not trying to out you. And say, come laugh with me. And you may laugh with us, literally.
How cool would that be?
I think it's awesome.
I do have to correct something, though.
What?
That was not officially recorded at the American Atheist Convention.
It was.
That was at the bar.
That was actually at Chili's.
That was at Chili's down the street.
But that was a group of the American Atheist Convention who migrated together, so that would still be considered an ancillary function.
Oh, okay.
Does it sound like I'm bullshitting?
You're really good at bullshitting.
I'm
so
good,
it's okay.
yes.
All right.
This episode today is not really much bullshit. This one is what I think is going to be another powerful episode. If you've already heard it on Ask An Atheist, I don't really apologize. What we did is brought the Ask An Atheist crew into our studio, along with Jerry DeWitt and Teresa Macbain, and just had a free-for-all.
Yeah, it was a fantastic opportunity to test out the capability of having all these different people all in the studio at once, and it really sounds great. I'm so pleased with the way it turned out.
We decided to record it as an Ask an Atheist episode, but then afterwards said, that works well for both of us, so it's a joint episode. We're kind of cross-promoting with Ask an Atheist. We love what they do. They are very much open to a lot of ideas and a lot of things, so we work together in a lot of those areas. Hope you enjoy this episode. It was recorded with Sam Mulvey and myself being hosts, and Teresa Macbain and Jerry DeWitt as our guests. Here it is.
Welcome to Ask an Atheist. My name is Sam, and with me today is Rich. Hello.
And we've got two other guests with us. We have Teresa Macbain and Jerry DeWitt. Let me give you a little background on who they are. At the American Atheist Convention in Washington, D.C., there was a incredibly powerful moment when a Methodist minister came out as an atheist, and we will share some of that story with you. That is Teresa Macbain, and she joins us. Welcome, Teresa.
Thank you. Thanks, Rich. Glad to be here.
Jerry DeWitt is the executive director of Recovering from Religion, which is, if you've heard us on our podcast on Living After Faith, we're the official podcast of Recovering from Religion. Jerry DeWitt is also the first graduate of the Clergy Project. And what the Clergy Project is, it's a project put together by Richard Dawkins Foundation, Dan Dennett, and Dan Barker, the primary three behind it, that give clergy people who are behind the pulpit yet are atheists, but they're trapped. They're looking for a way out. And Jerry DeWitt is the first to go through the program, to graduate. He is now out and in the raw. Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Sam, Rich, Teresa.
Teresa, tell us a little bit about how your situation developed. I mean, you are the buzz today. Everybody's talking about what happened in Washington, D.C., but it didn't start in Washington, D.C.
I've been off media for days getting ready for the Northwest Free Thought Conference, and it's everybody is talking about it. It is this enormous thing that it's such a moving thing. So
she's our hero.
Yeah, she is.
Wow, I don't know if I can live up to that or not. And my story is very complicated and long. And being a preacher, former preacher, let me add that little part, I know how to talk pretty well. So let me try to give you a snapshot. Basically, raised in a very fundamental home, extremely fundamental home. With my father was a pastor. Yes, he was a father, but he was a pastor as well. And I, as anybody would imagine, I grew up in that environment as a preacher's kid and bought into it 100%. Wasn't wild, wasn't trying to break out. I loved it and felt really early on that I was supposed to do something with my life as far as ministry. Now, being in that fundamental background, women weren't allowed to do that, so my outlet became music. But I always kind of carried that part with me that I wanted to help people and serve and felt called to ministry. I had some periods of questioning I would find some things in the Bible that didn't quite add up. I mean, I love to read it, and I love to study it, and I would ask my father, and he would tell me that God's ways were higher than my ways, which I knew that scripture well, and that doubting and a lack of faith was sin. So the guilt would heap on top of me, and I would just kind of throw it aside, stuff it away in a canister somewhere, hoping it would never come out, which it did, obviously. If I'm out as an atheist, a former pastor, apparently I had to deal with that stuff at some point. So fast forward a little bit, my life goes through normal stages, marriage, becoming a mom, and I'm still trying to ignore those things that I keep filing away. I do progress out of a fundamental church into a more liberal congregation, kind of a medium liberal, non-denominational group. Eventually that leads me into quite a liberal denomination, the Methodist Church, where they do ordain women. And I went through all the hurdles and received my credentials and started serving in Methodist churches. All this time, I think it's important for everybody to know that I was really in it, and really, as far as you can be, I was a true believer. Yes, I had doubts and questions, but it wasn't that I didn't believe. It was just that I didn't deal with my doubts. Now, when I became a Methodist pastor, the Methodists allow you to think for yourself. And for me, that was just freedom, unimagined freedom that I'd never had before. And really, it's what led me here. I was given the freedom to read outside of my little Christian bubble, my little fundamentalist Charles Stanley Christian bubble, and explore emergent church theology, which, if you're not familiar with that, it's very progressive. It's very much outside of the box of typical Christian theology, which led me to discover the ties in with Christianity to Greek mythology, to Roman mythology, to ancient cultures and traditions, to study then the Old Testament and realize it was myths and fables, and most of the Jewish, maybe not the Orthodox, but the majority of Jewish folks that I encountered believed that, and they were fine with it, that it was just stories with principles behind it. That really shot my faith. It was a huge shot into my faith there, and one after the other, the other positions just fell like dominoes. Hell, God can only be one way. There's only one way to God. I started to believe there was many ways to God, and considered myself a Christian agnostic. And then through my study, realized Jesus, actually, there was just a lot of questions about whether he really existed or whether he was just kind of a person that was transformed into this savior figure. And so that fell away, and I considered myself an agnostic for a period of time. It took some time and a conversation with a particular person that I confided in that really caused me to examine where I was and admit to myself that I was an atheist and had probably been one for a while. So there I am, trapped in the closet, discovered just out of desperation through a Google search, a fella named Dan Barker. You may have heard of him. I hadn't heard of him. I mean, he was in a different world than I had ever traveled. Read his book called Freedom from Religion, not realizing it was Freedom from Religion Foundation. And he called me back, and we talked for a long time. I can't tell you the relief to actually talk to him, again, not knowing that he was Dan Barker. And he connected me with a newly formed group called the Clergy Project, where I could go online in this virtual community in the safety of being anonymous and just find incredible support.
Another thing I'd like to say about Teresa, so much of her story is captured on her blog, The Agnostic Pastor. She blogged as an escape and as a way of just venting and getting the emotions out. And I'll be honest with you, Jerry will back me up on this.
Sure.
For us former pastor types, sometimes it's kind of hard to read because it is raw.
Yeah, right.
There are times that it is raw and it's painful. But if you ever ask yourself the question, why don't pastors just walk out and say, I quit? When you understand the emotion and the turmoil inside that it takes to get there, I can't recommend enough to read her blog because it gives you a different perspective on what's really happening.
I agree.
It's something that I can't say I know what it is to be in the clergy, but once upon a time, I looked into it. I know at least how much work it takes to get to that point to be a community leader. And I mean, in your case, Rich, you didn't just lose your family. You didn't just lose your job. Your entire life evaporated.
It did, absolutely.
And in your case, I know the Methodists. I know the Methodists pretty well. There's a large community of them where I'm from in Chicago, but they're not exactly. We discovered yesterday that they're not exactly responding positively to your.
That's correct. I'm from the South, and I think that builds in a little conservatism. Yes. I would definitely not consider the church I'm at fundamentalist, but they're definitely not liberal, as you might find in other states for Methodists. So, and a lot of folks have kind of migrated into this congregation from the Baptist church and from other churches, which are known for being more fundamental. So, yeah, it's really interesting. I've had people not communicate with me. I found out the congregation has locked me out, and I'm going to have to get special permission to go in and get my things, which for me, I mean, that's very emotionally disturbing. What am I going to do? Go in there and steal the sound system and sell it? Oh, yeah, she's an atheist. She's got to be a thief.
Right.
But thankfully, my husband is so wonderful, and he's going to go take care of it for me.
I remember when I came out, we were still very involved in the church, and we had been planning an Easter. I don't remember if it was Easter. I don't remember the holiday. There was a sign language and drama thing that we were doing, and my daughter was part of that. And she specifically asked me to go, so I called and asked the pastor, if I could do that. And he said, under these circumstances, he said, come late, leave early, don't talk to anyone. We'll have 2 people meet you at the door. And I knew who they were going to be. There are 2 deputies. So there are 2 uniformed armed deputies, one sitting on either side. I'm like, 2 weeks ago, I was preaching in that pulpit, and now here I am with armed men on either side of me.
They're treating you exactly like one would treat a prisoner going to a funeral.
No, treating actually worse, because our church, one of the deputies was the man over the work release program at the county jail, and he would bring the prisoners to service every Sunday. It was optional. They could come if they wanted to, but of course they all wanted to.
Right.
Because we would have their girlfriends and wives come, so that was the only time they would have, at all to do, that kind of thing. And we would serve them home-cooked food, so they wanted to be there. It was part of our outreach. But no, we treated them far better than I was treated when I was, and this, it's like, man, I'm not even wearing an orange jumpsuit.
And you know it before the fact, too, that's a possibility.
Right.
That's a huge part of the psychological terror that you live under, because you can either be the preacher or you can be the person who used to be a preacher. And in that religious community, being the person who used to be a preacher is far worse than anything else that you could ever do.
Right.
And so they treat you that way, and it's not a surprise, unfortunately.
It's heartbreaking, though.
It is heartbreaking.
It absolutely is. So one thing you mentioned that we actually talked about this in the episode we recorded 2 days ago, is we often get questioned about the historicity of Jesus. And for me, I've never taken it too seriously as a question. I'm a fan of history. I like when people do historical research, but personally, for my statement of lack of faith, the historicity of any particular religious person has never been very significant. But I haven't looked at it from the perspective of somebody who's leaving religion or leaving the clergy. Is that key to you? It sounds like it was at least largely important.
It was very key. I mean, the whole premise behind Christianity is that a human being who was also divine was born of a virgin, lived a human life. I mean, he sacrificed everything so he could walk as a human the way we walk and live, that he had followers, that he passed on all this knowledge and power to carry out the mission, to spread it to all the world, to us, and that in order to atone for all our sins, to pay for all the terrible junk we've done, was arrested falsely, tortured, crucified, killed buried, and then the biggie, rose from the dead. And that proves that he was God and that he did all these things. So without that, if you take that all away, it's not Christianity. I mean, obviously, Christ, Christianity. So passing that little piece was really pivotal. I'd called myself, I think I mentioned earlier, Christian agnostic. Right. That's because I still believe there was a supreme being, and I believed that Christ, at least I still held to some form of belief in Christ. I think I had done away with some of the more miraculous things and just rationalized that away and said, well, that's explaining supernatural or natural events that people didn't know how to explain at that time. So I looked, I think it was actually Bruce Grenisher's blog, Fallen from Grace. I think it was his blog that I was reading that kind of just alluded to this a little bit. And it just sparked, it was one of those sparks in my mind that said, hey, you need to check this out. You need to know. Inquiring minds want to know. The more I looked at it, it became pretty clear to me that I personally don't think he historically existed. Now, some do, some don't. I really don't think that it's important whether you think it was a human being that the story got kind of blown up in the 2nd century or that this human being didn't really exist. You can go either way with it and come out with the same result. I found so many other cultures through antiquity, all the way back to the Babylonians and Zoroastrianism, that had the savior plot to their religion. Indeed. Born of a virgin, grew up as a human being, but a divine human being, had disciples, had followers, sacrificed themselves for humanity, and rose from the dead. I mean, let me tell you, that was a devastating blow to me.
Sure. And what's important for people to understand, I know in the atheist movement, free thought movement, there's a portion of the population that's never been Christian.
Right.
And particularly maybe never been fundamentalist. To even get to the place where you can question whether or not there actually was a Jesus is a huge evolution of the thought process. You've gone through a lot of different levels of pain and agony to get to that point, because as a Christian in the United States today, with the charismatic influence that's over almost all theology, with its fundamental background, you not only think that Jesus was an actual person, you not only think that Jesus was the Son of God or was divine, as Teresa said, you're taught that Christ is the center of all things, that it is through him and to him and by him that reality itself is even held together. So you've gone a long ways away from what is being taught outside, inside churches in order to even get to that place. So, if somebody out there who never did believe thinks, the easy way to bring it into religion is just prove, very scientifically that Jesus never existed. There's a lot of ground you got to cover before you ever get to even accepting that question.
So the question, it's an important question,
Sure.
but it's a question that needs to get, there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be laid.
I would think so, wouldn't you, Teresa?
I agree.
Yeah.
I think so.
I think emotional groundwork has to take place before the intellectual groundwork is really going to get much traction, especially with preachers. Now, I was there in D.C. when you came out, and I just learned moments ago when we were doing a different discussion that there were two different, a lot of us from the Clergy Project were behind a screen and couldn't see what was happening. Teresa started a very emotional presentation by giving the most humble and heartfelt apology. Could you kind of share where you went with that?
Yeah, as I was just thinking about coming out and what that meant to me, I can't escape the thought and the reality that I was a fundamentalist. I grew up that way and I lived that way for half my life. And in doing so, I have been one of those emotional terrorists. I have been one of those people, as I called it when I came out, a hater. It's the best word I know for it. So my thought was just that I needed to say who I was and then just apologize. And that was it. So I did. I stood up there and apologized to everyone in the crowd, asking for their forgiveness for, as I said, knocking on their doors and trying to convince them how wrong they were, telling them they're going to burn in hell unless they follow the direction that I am following, which is the only direction, which is the right direction. And if they don't follow it, again, they're going to burn in hell.
After she said that, she started crying, weeping.
Yeah.
And we're behind a screen and we don't know what's going on. Jerry grabs me and a couple of other preachers, said, she needs us, let's go. And we ran up there. And when we got there and hugged her, we realized the entire more than 1,000 people in that room were crying, weeping, some standing, some with their head between their knees. Just to hear a fundamentalist apologize for being that person, it was unbelievable.
This is an important thing for me, is honestly the proof of the atheist visibility movement, the proof of what we've been building these last century or so, is here, is in these moments.
Yes.
Is how we treat people who have changed their minds and are now open with us and working with us. Teresa, how have we been doing so far?
Oh man, I couldn't have imagined the response I would have received, and I did receive. I knew, just because Jerry and Rich and some others that were involved kept saying, don't worry, they're gonna love you. David Silverman, just a huge help from American Atheist. You're gonna do fine. This is gonna be great. They're gonna support you. Trust us. They're gonna support you. And when I stood up on that stage, terrified, absolutely terrified, not because there were so many people out there, I've done that before, but just knowing what was about to happen and that I was really taking the leap, not knowing where I was going to land. When I made the first two sentences that stated my not my former name, but my false name, and then my real name, and declared that I was an atheist, and they absolutely leapt from their seats, clapping and cheering, which I just had to step away from the podium. I was so humbled, and then to move into it and find the response of tears and weeping, and the guys running up on the stage with Linda Lascola was a part of that too.
Linda,
Can't leave her
She
out.
was, that's right.
She's a little bulldog. Don't tell her I said that. No, she is amazing.
It's out in the wild now.
Amazing, yeah. I will never, ever, ever forget that. And even at the Northwest Free Thought Conference that we were at yesterday, the response, again, after we did the interview with Richard Dawkins, was just one of, not a single person said, why haven't you come out before? Don't you think you were being dishonest? Everybody has said, we've got your back. We understand how hard it is. We support you and your family now.
I felt cold terror that somebody was going to make that move. We hear, especially with Living After Faith, you hear story after story about people who are in the pews who just have these really harrowing experiences coming out. And as much as we want to love and support and protect them, they don't all come out wanting to support other people. And for example, to bring it to you, when you ran for vice president of Seattle Atheists
right,
a year and change ago, people would come up to you and me going, he sounds too much like a preacher.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
One of the people who voted for me didn't write my name down, wrote preacher man.
And my problem was that he sounds too much like a preacher. And I'm like, too much? Wait,
what would be enough?
What do you expect him to sound like?
This is what he did.
All the way back in October of last year, before I had come out publicly, I was making friends, making connections, and ex-preachers in the atheist movement began to warn me and say, change your hair. Of course, I've changed it this week because I've been out of hairspray all week. But, change your hair. Don't wear a suit. Calm your voice down. If you speak, sound more like a professor from New England than, whatever. And they really spooked me. And as I began to travel across the country speaking for local groups, just telling the Clergy Project story and how recovering from religion can benefit, little bit by little bit, I would kind of let my personality slip out some, because this is not only what I've been doing for 25 years, so it's ingrained, it's the world that I've lived in for 42 years. So to me, everybody else who doesn't speak like me and Rich and Teresa, everybody else sucks. Because that's what I'm used to.
Right.
And so I kind of would feel like I was sucking, when I'd get up and just try to, teach about my story, which was life-changing and had my whole world turned upside down, and I'm supposed to get up and do a 3-point, blah, blah, blah. Well, as I would let it slip, people would get excited. People would like it. And ever so often I'd have a naysayer during the question and answers that'd say, well, I'm feeling some emotion and I think, emotion is dangerous. And the rest of the group would shut them down. Time after time, the rest of the group would just shut them down. And then at the American Atheist Convention last weekend, when I got up to give my presentation, I just decided, and nobody has seen anything yet. Rich can definitely testify to this, that we haven't got out of granny low. We haven't got out of second gear yet on preaching. But I just decided to just be myself. And everybody loved it.
Yeah.
And it speaks well for the Clergy Project, because what a horrible thing to tell ministers that are having to sacrifice everything for their own personal integrity. Oh, and by the way, you're going to have to pretend once again to be someone that you're not in order to fit in.
There are other producers of Ask an Atheist who, like Aquaman,
yes,
who may disagree with me, but the preachers and people who have done the jobs that you have done in the service of religion understand emotional contact, understand the need to engage the entire person in the conversation. And atheists and rationalists, because we're atheists and rationalists and are based off of logic and reason, et cetera, feel that emotion sort of removes us from the debate, or it should be removed from the debate. But we're supposed to be a movement about people. People have emotions. I feel we should engage them, and I feel that's something that the Clergy Project and Rich really opened my eyes to this.
One of the things that just blew me away was right after Teresa's presentation, I'd left my audio recorder on the other side, so I was trying to cross this gathering of people to get to my audio recorder, and as I did, people just kind of mobbed on top of me. And what one guy said that stuck with me the most, and is my takeaway moment from that entire conference, he said, atheism has always had the brains, but now it has a heart.
Ah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, that is great. That gives me chills.
It does me too. Here's the thing. If you're listening to Richard Dawkins and you're not feeling something, then something's wrong. Yeah. Because I feel emotion even when Richard Dawkins is teaching us about evolutionary biology. I feel something with that. So I think it's now become more of a moot point than it's ever been.
Yeah.
I think this will be the fifth episode in a row where I mentioned Carl Sagan and Cosmos and stuff like that.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Just what the closest I am one of those people. My mom was Minnesota Lutheran, so it was casseroles and not much else. My dad, I'm from a line of agnostics, and so I had very little religious experience in my life. It's the one detente my family had, and the closest I ever got to feeling sort of a connection to the numinous or something like that was with Carl Sagan sort of stuff. So, and it's like, why are we running away from that? So the Clergy Project.
The Clergy Project is a project that was developed by 4 primary leaders: Richard Dawkins and the Dawkins Foundation, Dan Barker, Linda Lascola, and Daniel Dennett. The thought was through a study that Dan Dennett and Linda Lascola were working on, a research project regarding clergy who are in the pulpit and don't believe anymore. They kind of got the thought, well, there's got to be more than the original 5 that were involved in that project. So they put together, through sponsorship from those 4 agencies, the Brights, the Dawkins Foundation, and Freedom from Religion, they put together this website called the Clergy Project website. And it was kind of just an invitation-only site. It wasn't really well known. It wasn't published. The word wasn't out about it. And the 5 that were in that study were invited to be a part of this Clergy Project, and a few others that had contacted Dan through his books. The website was set up to be a very safe, very secure site where these active clergy people who were still in the closet received an anonymous name. No personal information was given as far as the site's concerned. They were fully vetted to make sure that they were not some type of covert agent or, looking to out a few preachers. And that's how it was set up. And it was just a forum for pastors to have mutual encouragement and support with each other. I came into it, as I shared a little bit ago. It'd been online for a few months, and it wasn't yet being, I don't want to say the word advertised, but they weren't yet soliciting any pastors like we are now. We have a public website, and we're out trying to raise some awareness, trying to raise some support for it. So Jerry and I and Rich were all part of this group, part of this secret society, if you will, that exists simply and still exists to keep us safe, to keep us secret, but to offer that encouragement, that physical human touch virtually that we all needed. So jump forward a year, we've been around for a year, and now we're taking it a step further. And that's really where I come in, even though Jerry and Rich and others are a part of it. We're taking it from just a virtual support community into a tangible support. Almost, someone commented yesterday to me that it's almost like the Underground Railroad.
Right.
Yeah. The comparison did not escape me either. I have to say, I'm coming to this from a perspective where 0 Day was the Reason Rally.
Monday the 28th.
The 28th, okay.
Monday the 28th, yeah. 3:00 in the afternoon.
I imagine that's going to be a date that's going to be in your head there.
That will live in infamy.
Yeah, but you've been at this a year, and clearly, so my view of this is a little different. You've been part of the Clergy Project for a year, and it sounds like you're moving it into more of a more public role.
Yes, we established 2 months ago, I believe, just a public website that gives a basic, this is what we are, this is what we're doing. If you'd like more information, you can contact us here, and here's the supporting agencies and information about them, and some testimonies, anonymously, of course, from some of us who are part of the group. So now we're taking the next step, which is the national evolutionary step, and that is working to provide 2 resources for pastors who are coming out. One is a reemployment assistance program that will offer to clergy resume writing. We've been in a particular world and worldview for all our lives. We know how to write a resume or write a CV or anything like that as far as religious employment goes, but it's not that we don't have the skills, it's just we don't have a clue of how to market ourselves.
That's key. Being a clergy person is not merely public speaking. There are other aspects to it that
you're an administrator.
Yeah,
you're
fundraiser development.
Yeah. That's right.
I managed a $300,000 a year budget.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Larger than most small businesses.
Yeah.
These are much needed skills. So.
Yeah, and we want to be able to translate those skills into something that's very marketable. Interview coaching, I don't know about Jerry, but when you go and you preach a trial sermon and you interview with the board at a church, it's a whole different ball of wax than when you're applying for a job, interviewing, doing follow-up letters, and doing all the pieces that are necessary to get some employment in the secular market.
Yeah. I mean, there are skills that clergy folks have that we can use outside of the church, but what is you think the employment transition is a difficult one? How? Because I can hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, just go get a job somewhere." Yeah,
for me, I'll give you just my personal example. The day that I realized that I did not believe that I had passed that threshold, I immediately started going through Craigslist, jobs, Monster.com, all these different places. And I'd already did a little bit of background work and realized I had skills, fundraising or development director skills, leadership, organizational management, etc. So those were the things that I targeted and found plenty that I would be able to do and do a great job. But here's the catch. I would send in my resume, send in my application, cover letter, get a call back, most times pretty quickly saying, "We like what we see here, but your experiences as a pastor, why, what's up with that? Are you leaving the church? Why are you leaving the church? Why are you looking for another job?" And
is there a scandal?
Yeah.
What would make you leave?
Oh, I hadn't considered that aspect of it.
Yeah.
And if you say you're burnt out, well, then you're mentally unstable.
Right.
So they're not going to hire you there either.
And it's important to remember that in so many cases, when a minister gets to the point that they're looking for an exit strategy, particularly those that we know in the Clergy Project, these aren't generally 22-year-olds, nor are they necessarily 62-year-olds.
Yeah.
These are 40s and 50-year-olds that you can't just say, well, just give up the ministry and walk across the street to Walmart and get a job. What if this person has a spouse who is very dependent on health insurance? All these things count. What if they've got a child in college? What if what if they're in the middle of a mortgage? What about all these real life issues? It's always simple to say, well, if you really don't believe and you're serious, then just get out. Well, it's never that simple for anybody, and particularly for clergy.
I was the example of the guy who did it wrong. I did it pretty much the way that you said, and I'm also the guy that wound up sitting at my mother's home. I had found the pistol that my dad gave my mother as a wedding gift. That's East Texas. You kind of got to understand East Texas is its own place. So her wedding gift was .38 Special. And I was the guy that sat there with this gun in my lap, stroking it like a pet, saying, if tomorrow's worse, I can use this.
Right.
And that was days on end. You can put yourself in that place, but I don't think anyone really... there was no Clergy Project then. There was not a soft place to land.
Right. Exactly.
And what I hope is that through the Clergy Project, through supporting the way we are with Teresa, with Jerry, that these people don't have to blow up their own lives, don't have to blow up their daughter's life, don't have to blow up the life of all those people around them, but that they can. And when you're talking ministers, you're talking people who are very trained and very skilled, and many times, have been through years and years of training and experience. But if that doesn't apply, if you don't have, I was lucky in that regard that I had a skill and a job I could just walk into. But for those who don't, there you've got the mortgage, you've got kids, you probably have a kid in college, and you're going to take an entry-level job somewhere?
Not without losing everything.
I've walked away from a lot in my life, I think, as we've talked about.
Yeah.
But never walking away from everything all at once. And personally, I think, and I'm talking to anybody who can help with this employment assistance program right now.
Yes.
I think being able to recognize where your mind is, work with your reason, and have what it takes, have the gumption to walk away from it and say, this is what I believe, this is the direction I'm moving in. That's personal character that anyone can, that's a skill in and of itself, the ability to do that.
I agree.
So I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up, but when I met Becky, the other producer, she was considering becoming a rabbi. So the question she would want to know is there anything for the Clergy Project for people in other religions? It seems very Christian heavy to start, and that makes sense. This is the United States.
Yeah.
But is there a direction for folks who may be rabbis or?
Yes. And as I said, as we evolve, these pieces of the puzzle are coming together with maintaining the anonymity of all parties involved. I can let you know we've got every brand of Christian that there is. We have priests, the Catholic denomination, which is of course Christian, Jewish rabbis. We even have some who were Muslim imams. So it's not, as you said, it is Christian heavy, and I don't know the race of anybody, so I have no idea until I met Jerry face to face, man. You could have. I could have been anybody from anywhere. You could have been anybody from anywhere. So it is kind of culturally diverse. It is growing in that direction. As we get out and we share more about the story and we share more about the project itself, and we build this foundation of the reemployment assistance, which we've just talked about, and we're working to develop a scholarship program so that when a pastor is ready and the family is ready, we're working to provide this safe place to land. We can say, here, the atheist community loves you so much. Right. Here is 6 months' salary. Okay. So your family the finances should never, ever, ever be a reason why a person can't step away. There's enough pressure with everything else.
That is a prison.
It is.
I like to say this is your life. If you're a true minister, you're a minister because you love truth and you love people. And in order to give that up, you're literally going to have to be broken. You shouldn't have to be broken and broke at the same time.
Yes.
That's too much to ask of your family.
The question that I ask that's important to me, how can the atheist community best serve the Clergy Project right now?
Right now is, first of all, the first thing that comes to mind is to open the doors for Jerry and I so that we can come and we can talk to your organization, we can talk to your group, we can share our stories and let you meet us face to face, experience, in a sense, the things that we've gone through, and just bring some awareness to the Clergy Project. That's the first place to start. The second place, I would say, is to seriously consider how can you assist these clergy persons as they try to escape the shackles, these bonds, this prison, as you said, perfect example. Do I have a seasonal home that I could offer?
Or room in a home.
Or a room in a home.
Right.
Yeah.
It's pretty intense. I've been out for a week now, and every time my phone buzzes, I look at it with a little bit of fear because
Absolutely.
it's just, what are they going to say now?
You received a message from a relative that was heartbreaking.
Yeah, I did. And trying to just protect my family because, even if they don't understand or accept, I still would like to kind of protect them.
But it's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking. The equation was that it would have been easier if I were gay to come out.
If your listeners can't quite yet imagine what we're talking about, imagine what it's like to see your phone light up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when you're not used to that, and the feeling you get in the pit of your stomach that says, what has happened? Right now, and I'm going to cry, I got to be careful, only because I've gone through it and I'm somewhat further away from it now. Right now, every time Teresa sees her phone light up, every time, whether it's 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon, she feels that same kick in the pit of her stomach because you don't know what it means. Mm-hmm. You don't yet know what's on the other side of it. And it's unfair. It's not the way the United States is supposed to be like. It's not how we're supposed to be living, and that's why we're here to change this and make sure that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, no one else ever has to experience that.
Now, at the Northwest Free Thought Alliance and several other times, people will often come up to me and say, is there a place for people who are leaving and religion? And always in the same breath, it's Rich Lyons, living after faith, and recovering from religion is always where I go. And we haven't really talked about it very much on this show. What is recovering from religion?
Well, it's really neat the way this has developed. If your listeners that's been with us through the course of this program, if they've got their minds wrapped around the Clergy Project, now what they can do is just set next to the initials TCP, the Clergy Project, RR, because it's basically the same mission, except it's not limited to just clergy members.
Right.
And what it does is it creates, all across the country, we have over 200 now, small groups where people can come together. We call it the 3 C's. The first thing that we try to do is connect people who are trying to recover from religion with other people who are also trying to recover or who have not quite yet transitioned into the place where they can go and be effective in the free thought movement or in the larger atheist movement or humanist movement. So I like to say it's the place where you dump all your baggage so you can get on the flight to atheism unencumbered, And so with that, we develop these small groups all across the country. So we connect them. The next thing that we do is we offer a form of counseling that is very self-help driven. because you've got people anxious to tell their stories, people who are anxious to hear other people's stories. In the midst of that, it's extremely therapeutic to be in that kind of environment. And if they need something professional, we have the resources to reach out and grab those professional people. We actually call that the Therapist Project, where we've registered therapists all across the country that have committed to only using secular tools.
That is incredibly necessary.
Very necessary.
It's also hidden, much like the Clergy Project, because a therapist doesn't want to be marked as an atheist because Christians will boycott their business.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So there has to be a certain amount of vetting of the person looking for the therapist, certain amount of vetting for the therapist. It's a pretty involved thing, but it's awesome. Many times you've heard me say, the luckiest man in the world because I found my shrink and she's just absolutely incredible and she is exactly what I was looking for. But the number one question we get at Living After Faith is, how do I find a shrink like yours?
Yeah.
And now that tool is in place.
Now that tool is in place. And the third C is simply content. Obviously, it's all out there. Everything somebody needs to know to grow and develop and become a free-thinking person is out there. But you don't want to have to take the time to find all of it or accidentally miss something that's very important just because you're trying to reinvent the wheel. So we've collected a lot of resource, a lot of information that we share with them. And we're transitional. We're not in competition with anyone because we don't expect anyone to stay in our groups. We don't want them to stay, just like a doctor doesn't want anybody to stay in their emergency room.
Right.
We're there to help them patch up, move on, and heal and be active in the larger movement. So it's a unique place. It's where people recover from religion.
There's really a vacuum out there. I keep bringing this home that there are people who are constantly asking me where they can find. Actually, where can I find someone like Rich's therapist? People ask me that question, knowing that we occasionally hang out.
Recoveringfromreligion.org. You can get there, and this beautiful dance is now taking place with the Therapist Project. The Clergy Project and Recovering from Religion, because out of the Clergy Project, you have ministers. Yes, they no longer believe, and I know to some people that's going to be a dirty word to say minister, but if you do a little research, it just means to serve. It's a servant. You have these natural-born servants who want to help ease human suffering. One of the biggest fears for them as they're coming out of their ministries is that they're never going to serve people again because they don't know what to do. Well, the great news is in Recovering from Religion, you have the people from out of the pews that can meet up with the ex-pastors. It makes a great relationship, a great dance, and a great service to the movement.
And these are people who are specifically, religion or not, are familiar with emotional responses, have dealt with grief, have dealt with joy, who know how to do these things.
And interestingly enough, with the ministers who are coming out, they've dealt with some of the same situations.
Oh, yes.
Even across different religious beliefs, their coming out process, you're not talking to someone who doesn't understand the coming out process. With Recovering from Religion, what you're going to see is these pastors know.
Right.
These pastors have felt the burn.
Right.
And I say pastors, I'm kind of reverting back, but that's where they were.
Clergy, right.
Yeah, and these people will know how to deal with and understand. And when you say, I was at home petting the pistol knowing that I could use it tomorrow if tomorrow's worse, they understand what you mean, because chances are it may not have been a pistol. It may have been something else, but they probably have something that had the same meaning to them.
Sure. So I have one question, and it's a bit personal. It's specific to Ask an Atheist, and that's we do news segments, we respond to emails, we get people asking us a lot of really pointed questions about religion, and we have a tendency to. People are looking for a place, a person or place to put responsibility for the things that religion has done that have hurt people, and we. At Ask an Atheist, we do say that people tend to be more moral than their religions. We're very people positive, but there's always sort of a little asterisk after that. And at the bottom of the page, there's except for clergy. And is that irresponsible I'd like an answer from all three of you. Is that irresponsible of us? And if it is, what would be a better thing for us to do if we can do it? I'll admit some moral failing there.
I don't know of a single clergy person who deliberately harmed anyone. Now, the exception to that may be some of the Catholic in their situation, but that's not what we're talking about here. I was 100% true believer, and I was not a harmful person, although I harmed people. I was the same guy I am now, in a different environment, in a different world. So I think it's painting an unfair picture of the clergy because you know me. Mm-hmm. You know, I'd give you the shirt off my back. But by the same token, if I thought you were going to burn in fire for the rest of your life, what kind of friend would I be not to try to pull you out or manipulate you out? So but as a true believer, I was not a deceiver, and I think that may be kind of where that statement was headed.
Yeah. You know, I definitely have to agree with Rich. There's been very few cases that I can remember where I saw someone who was so selfish that they knew they were doing harm and they overlooked it. But even then, that's me from an outsider's perspective. I can't get inside that person's head and know for sure that they completely understood the situation the way that I could see it from the outside. From the outside, it was obvious. Just for instance, I was in Des Moines, Iowa for about a year, and that church, the ministry at that particular time was very manipulative. It had developed over a course of church history of 50 or 60 years that brought this level of authority and minister involvement down into the congregation. So, they had grown up in that. That's what they had received. That's how it had developed. It was very hard. Even now, after knowing how we have been manipulated and taken advantage of, it's still hard to say 100% that person meant evil.
Yeah.
Because if I was behind their set of eyes looking out at the world, what would it look like to me? So it's just people. People are people,
Yeah, I think for me personally, I apologize. I confessed that I had done these things, but in doing them, my intent was that I truly believed that they were in harm, spiritual harm, physical harm, and wanted to help them and save them. I do feel that some of the hatred that we get as clergy persons, we've kind of not necessarily invited it, but it's definitely something that we've fostered.
We may have earned it.
Yeah, we've set ourselves up as these spiritual authorities.
Yes.
We've used our power, and there are those, I'm sure you could name them, that have really taken advantage of that and really used their authority and power. At the Reason Rally, Nate Phelps was there, whose father is the pastor of Westboro Baptist. I mean, that's the obvious example that everybody will jump to.
Right.
But as far as Clergy Project, I know each and every one of the men and women that are there have been a part of that, as far as this is what I believe and I'm convinced of it, and I want to help you because you're in the wrong. I want to save you. That's our word.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so the intents were very genuine. The intentions were very loving and compassionate. It just kind of, religion transforms things into something.
It does.
Something different.
Yeah. If you could somehow put the entire world through a scanner and show that everyone involved in religion is 100% sincere and means the best, everyone, that still would not mean that religion is beneficial to humanity.
Yeah,
that's
and
right.
it still would not mean that they're moral or more moral or less moral. And you would still have to deal with the fact that the clergy are the leaders of this particular belief system that we know has caused great damage through history.
So to bring it back to my question, to go back to an episode of Living After Faith that I was on when I talked about my time at when I was shanghaied into
Kidnapped,
a Baptist.
yeah. He was kidnapped and taken to a Jesus camp, to give you the
Oh my goodness.
thrown into a bus and hauled off to Jesus camp.
From an outsider's perspective, they may have genuinely believed my soul was at risk, but it was very difficult, especially for my 12-year-old mind, or however old I was at the time, to not perceive that as hate.
Yeah.
It did not feel like they were concerned about me. It felt like they were concerned about something that was outside of me.
Right.
How do we...
And you're right by feeling that way.
Yeah.
He's very
100%.
accurate.
You're right.
Yes.
That's right.
So when people come to us and are asking who is responsible do we talk about the people who are basically running these religions, or do we just say it's a systemic thing?
I would say systemic. When you as a human are put in a place where, number one, you answer to no authority, you quote answer to God, but there is none, and you perceive the rest of the world. I mean, what would you do? I'm looking you in the eye, Sam. What would you do if people you know and love were inside your home and it was on fire?
Absolutely.
What limits, and you put that in a pressure cooker and turn up the heat
for 2,000 years,
and let people develop the process that operates in, and it becomes a very, very ugly machine. The one I was involved in was horrifically ugly, the manipulation that took place. And yet, as I have told you before, I manipulated people. It's what I did.
Yeah.
It's what we were supposed to do. It's what we had to do. And yet, I look back at that. I apologize for that. I hate that. I'm really not that person.
and we're working hard to make up for it.
Yes.
Yes, we are.
And that's really clear.
But and I did. I stayed in my church 2 years after I no longer believed their doctrine to try to heal people from the damage I'd caused and that whole system had caused. And, you know, the easy thing would have been to walk away. But I did stay because I was committed. And I think that's what you see in the Clergy Project. You see people who their first thought is, I don't want to tear everybody's world up.
This is an incredible winnowing, because now we've got people, this just speaks so much to me right now, is we've got people who are putting people over ideology.
Yes.
Yes.
That,
Absolutely.
That's right.
100%.
That is it.
yeah, I have nothing to say about that. That is what not just the atheism visibility movement needs, not just what a recovering from religion needs, not just the clergy, but that's what as far as I'm concerned, the whole planet needs.
Yes.
What
Yes.
everybody needs.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
You know, in Christianity, we would say, hate the sin, but love the sinner.
Oh.
Okay. I would say in atheism, in answer to your question about who do we hold responsible, I would say hate the stupidity, but love the stupid.
That's pretty good, Jerry. Can I borrow that one sometimes?
Absolutely. It's all yours.
May I suggest something, a sticker, something?
I want it on a T-shirt.
Write it down over there so we don't forget.
Put that on a T-shirt and I'll wear it to work.
All right. Well, my name is Sam, and with me is Rich Lyons and Jerry DeWitt and Teresa Macbain. Thank you very much. It's recoveringfromreligion.org. And does the Clergy Project have a website yet?
Yeah, clergyproject.org.
All right. Thank you very much.
I know we've been hearing a lot about the Clergy Project and Jerry DeWitt, Teresa Macbain, a lot of that on episodes. But just to give you an idea that we've got other things coming up, we met a couple of guys that were trying to get on and trying to work out the timing of when we can have them in studio or on Skype, who are both Hasidic Jews. One of them even mentioned in Penn Jillette's book, God No. And if you heard me talk about his book in the past, I talk about his unbaptism experience where he took the guy out, bought him a cheeseburger with a bacon
cheeseburger,
and all this shellfish and stuff, and helped him break through the Hasidic Jew nature that can't touch these things. That's the guy we're going to have on. We also met a very interesting man who is a former Mormon, recovering from the Mormon faith, and we're going to have him on, and a special guest host that we can't really announce right now, but we know it's going to come together. So we've got a lot more stories, just normal people coming up.
I'm Deanna Joy Lyons.
I'm Rich Lyons.
Come laugh with me.
You've been listening to the Living After Faith podcast, the official podcast of recoveringfromreligion.org. The music in this episode is Rosecross by Morrison's Prophecy. You can follow on Twitter at LAF with me, like Living After Faith on Facebook, or go to livingafterfaith.com. Thank you for listening to Living After Faith.